Good morning. I hope you had a nice evening yesterday. Today we're going to look at something slightly different that Mariana already yesterday spoke a bit about, but I will go more into details. And just to orient ourselves again, we are still in the theory-based methods, and Mariana spoke yesterday about the realist evaluation. We originally thought a bit of the QCA as well, but I have actually studied QCA here at the Central European University. There's a very good professor called Carsten Schneider, who, he researches QCA, but I thought that it's too complicated for a short for a short session. It sounds very simple. It makes sense, but in order to really be able to use it, you would actually. I would recommend, for example, a summer school. There is this MethodsNet summer school. They are not terribly expensive, and I can't remember where they are. I think this year they are in Vienna, because I know the Central European University takes part. Some of my old professors are there. They actually offer pretty good methods courses as well. So qualitative research, quantitative research, and applied research. So so there you could do a QCA, but yeah. So there just a few words about that. It's I guess at least in Finland in the 70s. They were very enthusiastic about this kind of mathematics, like these circles, like Venn diagrams. Yes. So, what is the intersection between A and B and C? This was big thing in the 80s, and the QCA is based on that. So you are looking for overlaps, and you are looking for similar kinds of patterns. So, for example, Professor Schneider, he works on democratization. So and the QCA research in political science is quite much on democratization. So, which factors are needed, necessary and sufficient, yes, for the democratization process to start. And I've done it for a couple of projects. It's very interesting, but there again, but I think this is also with statistics the same thing, that you do a lot of research, then you put it into the computer program, and within 5 seconds it spits you the answer, and you have worked for a month to get to that point. So yeah, but it's an interesting approach. But I would say that it's good only if done properly. That this kind of very light comparisons, it's not very good. But what is good is that it allows for systematic comparison of cases up to 50 or something. Then for that it's good. But yeah, it's you have to work quite a lot to get to, for example, the point about what do you consider, for example, about democratization. That I think there was if you had the military regime, or if you had free elections, and you have to define all of this and then understand the different contexts and be able to find a kind of general level of comparison. And then it's either, if it's crisp set, it's either yes or no, and that's still kind of clear. And then they even do fuzzy sets, which is anything between 0 and 1, and that's when it gets messy. But it's interesting, very, very interesting. But yes, so QCA not today. Contribution analysis we talked about yesterday, and today we're going to look at process tracing. The interesting thing about all of these methodologies actually, and I think this is the part of evaluation that I like the most, which is that you should use that there's no right answer. That you have to use the kind of methods that fits the question. But of course, there's a budget and time constraint, so it's not like not like you can do anything you want. But the process tracing answers different questions than, for example, contribution analysis. So they are not interchangeable. You can use them you can use them together, but you can't necessarily. Well, actually, you cannot use them to answer the same question. And that's why the evaluation questions are so important. That what do you want to find out? That's the main thing. Now, so process tracing is actually it's a bit like a micro case study within like one topic. So it's called like within case analysis. So you don't. So you go very deep into one case, but you look at processes, and basically you know that there was an input, and you know that there was a change, and you are trying to understand how did this change happen. That what was the method, or like what was the mechanics of the change, and quite a lot of other methods, they try to establish whether there is a relationship between the cause and the effect. And here you know that something happened first, something changed, but you want to figure out, like what was exactly the thing that led to the change. So this is, it is very interesting because it brings the mechanisms more into light. And as you know, in the name, it's process. What is important in process tracing is that let's say that in a lot of other evaluation mechanisms, the people are kind of forgotten. But here, it's the people and their interaction which are the important things. Of course, there's the surrounding environment as well. But for instance, if we think about, let's say, what would we say? Let's say now, like youth policy, let's say, like change in higher education law. That we know, for example, that the European Union gave some recommendations, even though they don't have, it's a national competence like education, but the European Union gave some recommendations about, let's say, how the higher education institutions should operate. Or, for example, now better one, inclusiveness of higher education. This is a soft law thing in the European Union. So the European Union is promoting inclusiveness in higher education. And it's doing it by, let's say that the member states cooperate, they publish reports, they discuss this, they fund Erasmus Plus projects, the European University Associations, they include some inclusiveness actions and things like this. And then we experience that there is a change in the higher education law in a country, which becomes more inclusive. Like there are more inclusiveness. There's an article stating that higher education institutions must have inclusiveness strategies, let's say. So we see that there is some kind of a connection. But then we want to find out, how did this happen? And it's a bit like a detective story. And actually one of the main proponents of process tracing, who is the oldest one, David Collier, he has this one one article in which he is using a Sherlock Holmes story as like as an example of process tracing. That there was a murder, a man was found dead, his horse was missing, and something else, and then they were looking at they created some hypotheses that who killed the man, and then they went through the steps to confirm whether what was the strength of the evidence, and which what was plausible and what could be ruled out. So actually this is quite much like Vera Stanhope or some other detective stories. In my childhood, I guess you're too young for this, but Mariana might remember we had Der Fuchse und Derrick from Germany. Yes, that's what we grew up with. So something happens and you start looking for clues, and then you say that, oh, it could not have been him because he was out of town that evening. It's like, okay, so we rule him out. And then could not have been her because the strength of the blow was too much. Could not have been her because let's say that the perpetrator was at least 170 centimeters tall, or something like this. So you go through the evidence and you try to eliminate some things, and then gather evidence and test whether it's right. And the same way as in detective stories, the evidence has to be strong enough, or you cannot have your story is not good. So circumstantial evidence is not good, like we know from the American all this detective and police series. Like circumstantial evidence doesn't get you convicted, but there has to be actually something linking the perpetrator to the crime. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So this is fun. So in the inclusiveness example, so what you would want to find out is that what was the process of the change in the law, who participated, what was discussed in the meetings. You would want to see, for example, drafts of the legal proposal. You would want to see which experts were heard. You would want to see the list of the documents referred. You would look at, for example, the attendance list to the meetings to say okay, so this guy who had been let's say the Finnish correspondent with the EU Center for Inclusiveness, that he was in the unit which was drafting the law, and his document was referred to in the preamble or in the background documents, and and then he became a ministerial advisor, so he told the minister that it has to happen this way. So you might do interviews and document analysis or something that makes a point that this is how it actually happened. Interestingly here, the first person interviews are considered less strong evidence than documents, because people might say that yes, it was my doing, and I was central element in this thing getting into the law, whereas that might not be the case, or they might downplay their role. So if you want to have the real evidence, then you should have something concrete, documented, and you say that, and here is that the process tracing is emphasized the connections between actors, actions, and resulting behavioral changes. So it's kind of like looking inside the box, because in a lot of other pieces of research, in evaluation as well, you look whether there's a connection between the program and the change, but you don't actually necessarily look at what was the exact process of the change. You might have a theory of change and you might want to prove some parts of it, but this one goes quite deep into it. But I'm yet not saying anything negative. so, so yeah. So as I said, within case, causal inference, and evidence-based reasoning. So this is important. You need to have evidence. And they test the causal path. And as I said, it complements other methods. It's quite resource intensive. And as I said, it doesn't answer all of the questions you might want to answer. So quite often it's used in combination with other methods. And it employs Bayesian logic, which means this is the probabilistic logic. So you have, so you think that this is the plausible thing, and the probability is, somewhere that it most probably happened. Then you try to find out more evidence, and then you refine your the probability again with the evidence. So it's exactly like detective work. That in the beginning you say, yeah, most probably it was her, and then actually, at least in my favorite detective series, Shetland, the D.I. Perez would always say that, like, in the beginning of the investigation, that we cannot rule anything out. So you wouldn't start saying and only pursuing one line of argument, but he say we need to get some evidence, and then you form some hypothesis, and then you start dropping things out as, it couldn't have been him, and then then there's something, then, and then it was that person. so yeah, this is the way that it goes. So good parts, it's very rich, it goes very deep, it gives the kind of understanding that you don't get from some other methods. You can test rival explanations, and the evidence is documented. You document your assumptions, you document your evidence, you test your evidence. Again, the same thing what I said yesterday, that it makes you be quite critical towards your own work. That you need to say, okay, can I really, with confidence, say this with this amount of evidence? You can use it to complement also quantitative methods, other methods, and also the very hard things, the intangible interventions, knowledge work, education, institution building. This is I think this is the hardest part. I mean, for instance, I have had these evaluations where I have to assess the effects of the training measures, which is it's super hard, that yes, there's training which is being provided, but then what is the what is the link between the training and the outcome? That's the hardest part to document. Or at the moment we have one evaluation where we have to assess the link between the increased focus on animal welfare in the rural development program with the consumer interest in Finnish food. And and we are actually struggling with the fact that how do we link the consumer behavior to this program? That so this is really hard to link it. We have managed to do it somehow. I'm still not satisfied, but luckily this evaluation finishes in 2026, so we still have time. But it's really hard because if cows have better larger grazing area or better housing or improved health care, then A, does the consumer know about it? B, does the consumer care about it? Or if they're just interested in the price? So this connecting these dots is really hard, and this way we can try to figure out Okay, we are not using process tracing, but yeah, there's still time. We have more than a year for it, so we might end up doing something like this. But yeah, so the intangible interventions, which you otherwise you kind of write something, maybe theory based, but it's, you know, you might not believe it yourself either, whether it's or then you say that it is not possible to confirm it, or like it's not possible to answer this question.
Sorry for
Yeah.
the curiosity. In this animal welfare case, do they have like a certificate or something that the consumer can know that this animal was raised differently?
Some of them do. Now there is a kind of a animal welfare, kind of like a sticker label. That's a new thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because in Spain, sorry, because your example is
Yeah.
kind of similar to what I'm working. They have the like the what they call the fire flocks there.
Yeah.
So it's goats and sheep that they use to do also forest management and also like the meat. It has to do also with the welfare, but it's like a multifunctional herd that you have. So
Yeah.
people, they did a willingness to pay study, and people were willing to pay more because they also help, prevent wildfires and things like that. So
Yeah. Oh, yes, yes, that exactly that way. Yes, this is the thing. Yeah, yeah. Now there is now an animal welfare label, but then there are also these marketing tricks. You know, for example, that this is a milk from happy cows, and then you're like, okay, how are these cows more happy than the others? Like, I don't know. We just came up with this, or the marketing agency came up with this, and it sells quite nicely. So there are some rival things happening, and then there's organic as well, and some other labels. But yeah, so now there is this new animal welfare label, which actually helps a bit. Also our case, so that we can track the people who buy the animal welfare label, or at least to do like a consumer panel on them. But yes, so these are the good things about process tracing, and now I get to the limitations. As always, okay. Apparently, like every time I speak to you, I say that time-consuming and resource-intensive. It is. It definitely is, because uh, you need to work quite hard to understand the things. Um, I um, I was in a training by Derek Beach, who is a professor at Aarhus University in Denmark, and he does a lot of process tracing and he teaches it. And as you can see, quite a lot of the materials I have are from his different writings. He was saying that normally a PhD, where you would have about 3 to 5 years, you could do 3 process tracing case studies and compare them to each other, and that would be a PhD. So, so yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing very much of this in an evaluation, but I think as a test for some part, it could be good. You require good theory, because without the theory, you're lost. Also, it's not very generalizable. So it might be that it works in it worked in that context that time, but that might be it. On the other hand, I will later talk about also the comparative process tracing case studies, which is also one thing that people do, and that's a bit different, but you build it differently. It really, the same as in the detective stories, that it depends on how your theory and the empirical observables come together. So even if you have a good theory, but what you are finding doesn't support it, then you have to do something else, or you have to figure it. You have to rewrite it. So you need to work quite a lot on getting the theory right, or like to get it to be testable, and then to get the evidence. And yeah, because it's based on Bayesian logic, however you pronounce this correctly, you are not trying to prove the effects, but you're trying to reduce the uncertainty of the contribution to any changes. So, like, yeah, you're trying to say that that I am very confident in saying that this is the main cause. So that's about the level that you're going to get. You're not going to be able to say that it was by this much or that this is certainly the case, because you're never trying to do that. You're just trying to be as confident as you can in saying that this is how it went, which is also kind of permissive. That that you think that with the evidence that I have, that I can rather confidently say this. And what you start is that you start again from the change, and you look at the contributions. So in a way, for program evaluation, that you would start with the intervention, and then the outputs and the results. This doesn't work this way exactly, because you're looking for the change, and that's what you focus on, and that makes it interesting. And also, what I like about this is that it doesn't believe in like process tracing is not based on deterministic logic that, for example, the interventions work. They say that, well, that we'll see in which context it works and what happened. So it's not automatic with direct lines and linear progress. So what you do is that you develop a set of hypotheses. Oh, no, why do I have contribution here? No, analysis. No, I have a wrong source. And you test the hypotheses, and then you update the theory. No, now this part is wrong. Sorry, this is weird. No. Anyway, I will go to this. So this is at least correct. So what you can do with process tracing is that you can either test the theory or build a theory. So these are like theory-centric. Or you can focus on one case. And these things, or like the theory-centric and case-centric process tracing, they are built a bit differently. So, so in the theory testing, you are looking whether the causal mechanism is there and does it work like we thought that it would. That you already have a theory, then you test it, or then you're trying to build a theory to see how something happened. And the case-centric, you're focusing on that one case and looking at what are the mechanisms and what are the probable causes for, or like the probable factors that actually explain the outcome. And now you will see how these actually differ from each other. There's very good literature done by especially Derek Beach and like in collaboration with others. And I like the fact that he also uses a lot of table or like these graphs. So I didn't put the theory testing and the theory building because they are a bit similar. So the main point is that you conceptualize the causal mechanism, like how you think that, how would it happen? And you have here activity 1, so how would the activity create a change here, which then creates another change? So for example, here there's, how do liberal ideas lead to peace? That's a nice one. So what you, so you first you make the you like create the causal mechanism, then you operationalize it. So how do you collect data? What kind of data do you need? Then you collect the evidence. And then when you're doing the case-based process tracing, you actually you are using both deductive logic and inductive logic, and then testing it. So you're making kind of like rival hypotheses, and then you are testing whether they are sufficient explanation for the outcome, and then you continue continue until sufficient explanation. So you will be in a loop for a while. So they work a bit differently, but I think the main point here is that also here is the conceptualize, operationalize, and collect evidence. But the conceptualization differs here. Interestingly, then there is this way of doing the cross case analysis, which makes it even. I think that's a very interesting one. But having a background in comparative politics, I am kind of like stuck in the idea that how do you find comparative processes? What are you comparing? That's I have this like this thing in my head when my professor was always like, what is this a case of? It's a good case, best case, worst case. Are you comparing outcomes? Are you comparing processes? Like, what is it that you're like? How comparable are these two things? So in order to get to the point where you are able to compare something, you have to already know quite a lot. And I think this is something I have seen in some especially during my studies. The MA and PhD students, when they start and like, oh, I'm going to compare like 4 cases, and then in comes the professors. Okay, yeah, tell me more about the cases, please. And then it's like, I'm going to compare Finland, Sweden, and Norway. Like, okay, but what about them? They're like, please don't work at national level. Like, go deeper. And then you realize, like, oh, they are not comparable at all. So yeah. I just recently had like a call for tender for evaluating the implementation of rural development policy in the regional and local, the interplay, like how is the governance model for that. And one of the questions was that, what are the benefits of having this kind of a governance model, that please do an international benchmark. It looked like a totally innocent question amongst 10 questions. But then when you start thinking that, like, what can you actually do about it? Because you would need, in order to have proper comparison, you would need to have a country which has similar level or like similar type of regional governance, that they would actually have the same kind of rights and duties. So to get to that point, you have to like somehow, I don't know what is the source, even to get to like which European countries would have even remotely similar regional government structures like Finland. I know Sweden doesn't. That's usually the easy case for us. Denmark doesn't, for sure. And then to say that, the governance model between the regional and local level, and then look at whether the specific administrative structure in administering the funds, whether Finland is doing it well. It looked like an innocent question, but I foresee at least 2 weeks of work for somebody for doing this. And actually it's going to be more, most probably, if you have to interview people as well. Because it's not only to understand how does this model work, or like how does it operate, but also whether it's good. What are the benefits of their administrative model? There's like, so many questions. But I think, my colleague was telling me not to overthink it, and just move on with it, and we'll figure it out once we get there. We win. But yeah, I got to this point where like, oh my God, like, you know, what can I compare? I don't even know. But we will see. Now, okay, so what do you do actually in practice? This is the interesting thing. This looks so easy. So first you identify the hypothesis. So like the detective, you're like, who could have committed the crime? How could the crime have happened? Possibly. You establish a timeline of events, you know, when between what and what did the change happen. And then you make a causal graph. So basically a simple one, like X, Y, Z, or like 1, 2, 3. And then you identify alternatives for every moment. So like it could have happened this way, could have happened that way. And also identify counterfactual outcomes, so what would have might have not happened. But basically you're trying to think about different realities, different kinds of explanations of what could have happened, or how this change could have happened. And then you go and find evidence to support your hypothesis. So this is the part where you would be collecting information, documents, all kinds of information actually. But quite a lot of this is actually document-based, interview-based, and also maybe some statistical or survey data. But surveys, I find that they are a bit difficult since people don't always remember things. And if you say especially if you ask a question about before, so like before you had tasted, I don't know, before you had tasted the Italian ice cream, did you like ice cream? Like, I don't know when I first tasted it. Like, it's very difficult to think to remember what you thought before something happened. And also something that in the research that might be interesting turning point. For that person, it might have been just a Tuesday. So it's not, not necessarily that they remember these things, but there could be some evidence. And then you do these tests. I mean, these are the strength of the evidence. I will get to that in the next slide. They have the funny names. Like straw in the wind is kind of like weak evidence. Then hoop is something, you know, it's like the circle that you must cross in order for something to happen. If you don't cross it, then it doesn't happen. Then the doubly decisive, this is the strongest one. And smoking gun is something that like, oh, haha, since it's there, you know, we might think that this is important. As long as you do not get to the fact that this hypothesis could not have happened, so if the hoop test is a no, as in like if something is compulsory to have happened for the event to take place, let's say in our detective story, the compulsory thing would have been, for example, that the perpetrator or like the criminal is in the same city. So, if the criminal is, or like if the suspect is clearly, let's say that they would be in Vienna at the time of the crime, then it's then it's a no. So we can rule out this person. The straw in the wind, this is the circumstantial evidence. So whether it's a no or yes, it doesn't matter. You have to test the other hypothesis. And the smoking gun, that could, for example, be something that, let's say that like they had all of these people had an argument with the victim. Yes, but might also be that the argument had nothing to do with the crime. So that it by itself does not rule out anything. But then when there is absolutely no way that something else could have happened, when this test is a yes, then your hypothesis is validated. So, but the nicer graph, no, not yet. So we'll get to the test soon. So as I said, the process tracing actually, it's not completely stabilized. So there is no like true prescription yet. These ones come the closest. The InTrack, this is their process is for a single process tracing. So you identify the change, establish the evidence, you document the processes leading to the change, establish alternative explanations, and assess the evidence. So this is like in one case when you're looking at one. The Beach and Raimondo, they took this thing to a different level. It's the newest publication, a World Bank document. They are doing, this is the process that they see for comparative case process study, process tracing. So yes, the same thing, you make a theory, and then you trace the process, you do the field work, and then you are looking at different cases and you're comparing the cases to learn from them. So this is one step further. But in general, the main thing is that you first make a theory, then you test it. The same way as in, what was I speaking yesterday about?
Contribution analysis.
Yes, contribution analysis. Yeah. So here, yeah, as I said, you make a process theory, then you trace it, and okay, this is for the comparative studies. That if you use it, you draw lessons from the cases studied. But in a single case study, you would stop here. But I included this because this is actually quite a nice way of doing it. And the interesting thing is that, yes, they use a kind of a theory of change, but they use a process theory of change, which is not. It's not, that we have the inputs, outputs, results, and impacts, but they have the kind of like the input or the actions, and then they have the outcome, which is the change, and then the process is in the middle, like what steps led to the change. So this is a bit different. Yeah, Derek Beach, when he was teaching us the process tracing, and he was saying like, you guys with your theory of change, that that is the process theory of change that is important, and the differences between the two are really that what we learned yesterday, and you're trying to describe the causal links between the input activities, and the causal links between the kind of like time-bound activities as well, or like the changes, and you also have assumptions. So in the theory of change, the assumptions are important because that's what's causing the change. And in the process theory of change, you try to so it's like behavioral link. The behavioral change is that if I say this, then then somebody reacts this way, and then that happens. So, easy thing, you say, my son asks me in the middle of a dinner that like, Mom, can I have ice cream for dinner? Or like ice cream for dessert? And I say, well, eat your food first. There are two possible pathways. Either he gets really angry and starts saying that you always say this. And then he stops eating or gets really slow, and and then another process starts, or then he gets motivated, and then it's like, okay, I will eat my dinner fast, and then then he moves on to the ice cream. So these are the different kinds of processes that can lead to it. Although here there would be possibly two different conclusions. One of them is that he actually gets ice cream, and the other one is that he sits with his plate for an hour and does not get an ice cream. So, but yeah, so there's like there are loops between actors and the actions, and because something happens, then there's a reaction, something. I know that in qualitative research, when they use this is used quite a lot actually in like war studies and in the like psychology of the leaders, that if Churchill said this, that Churchill met with somebody and then something happened. I see the press does this a lot nowadays. That when when one world leader meets with President Trump, then what are the next actions going to be towards that country or in that field that they might have talked about. So this is used quite a lot sort of in the normal speech and in this kind of policy fields, but this is actually trying to prove that this was exactly the case. But yeah, I know historians, they use this kind of things a lot, because then they need to find the concluding evidence that this is how it is. And about the process theory of change, you need to come up with key episodes of interaction that they link the actions of, so that there is a link between the program or whatever was happening with the actions. And the key episodes, they are called causal hotspots. I like this. This is really, because of course, you can make a theory which is so granulated that, you have 15 different steps. But that doesn't make sense for your operationalization, because you will be doing field work for like 10 years to get this. So you might initially have a lot of steps, but then you might, push it together and say that these are the main events or the main changes or something like that. And and then you look at the which interactions have been critical. That without something, that would not have happened. So you might actually end up doing quite a lot of work only to summarize. And this is the kind of process theory of change, the model. It's actually quite simple. So you're looking at the intervention, and then there's the outcome or the contribution at the end. And then you are just modeling or like just listing them, that because somebody did something, there was a change in another thing which led to the outcome. And you might have a lot of these one after another. Then you have the challenges or barriers you have to think about, and the contextual conditions. And you model this, and then you start testing whether this actually happened. So, when you are developing the process theory of change, you first have the descriptive analysis of what happened, what activities were associated with it, and how, were they important for the outcome. And you make an initial you start thinking about the hypothesis, like how could this have happened? And then you start breaking it into pieces. That, in the detective stories, you find a man on the beach. And how did it happen? Did he fall from, did he wash ashore from a ship? Was he transported to the beach? Did he walk there by himself? All of these things, you are starting to think that how could this have happened, and then for all of these options, you think about how this could have happened. So then you start looking at the ferry timetables and the maritime navigation maps. That which were the ships nearby, how did the water currents go. You look at the possible routes to the beach. And then start seeing, okay, are there steps? Are there any belongings? Are there tire marks? Do we have CCTV camera footage from nearby? And then we see, okay, there were no cars whatsoever in the going towards the beach in the past 24 hours. So okay, we can rule out the car. And yeah, let's say like, there was no water found in his lungs, so blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I guess you can see that I actually really like detective stories. I have watched a lot of them. So yeah, but this is the way that this also goes, and that's what makes it interesting, because you're trying to, you don't believe the first story, but you're trying to figure out that what actually happened. And that's fun. And then, of course, the tracing, what you do. This is the simple, this sounds so simple, operationalization of expected observables. So it's a bit different from normal way of doing research, in a sense, like you're trying to think about what we should find. So, for example, should we find tire marks, that or not? Yeah, if we find tire marks, well, then this is, might still not have been that car. But anyway, so you are thinking about, what do we need to know in order for something to be that we can with confidence we can say that this is exactly what happened. So you have to, before you start thinking about your data or information collection plan, you start to think about what is it that we should actually be finding, because that then defines what you're going to be looking at. In terms of policy research, but also in detective stories, you would do, you don't do surveys, but interviews, attendance logs, minutes of meetings, social media. Nowadays, social media is quite often used for research and in detective stories. So you would be looking, for example, that, if you're looking for a change in policy, then you would be looking at, who was present at the conference, who was writing the research, or who was present in the meetings, and what did they say in the meetings. So could have been that, they say that, for example, about the, going back to the previous example of the inclusiveness of higher education, that if we find in the meeting minutes that, let's say that the committee reviewed listened to the presentation from this person about inclusiveness in higher education and decided not to include it in the legal proposal because it's it's not seemed like the priority. Then we are like, oh, okay, so this thing wasn't important. And then we come to like the next one where it says like, European Commission recommends that the country X includes this in their legal proposal. And there's, aha, now we found it. So that you can look at what actually happened in the meetings. Of course, I know, having written meeting minutes myself for the government, you don't write everything that was spoken. You only write a short summary of what was decided and nothing else. And then you go to do field work. You try to triangulate across the sources. Don't believe everybody, and don't you have to be critical of the sources as well. And then when you have gathered the information, you make these diagrams. So summarizing like with arrows and boxes and things like that. That what is the mechanism of the change. Evidence matrices. I had to even look at this up, but actually then I realized, oh, this is what we actually do when we do document analysis. So, for example, now we have simple thing, the equality and equity evaluation. We went through regional strategies. And then we tried to find out that, and actually we did this in Excel. So there's the document is this way on the lines, and then the columns are the things that we are trying to find out. That does the document include anything about equality? Yes, no. Does it include anything about equity? Yes, no. If yes, is it in the SWOT analysis? In the needs assessment, or in the actions, or in the objectives. So you just, you go through every document through the same lenses. And this is why it's important for you to know what you're looking for. Because if you have reviewed, like in our case, about 70 different documents at the local and regional level, and if at one point you realize like, oh, we didn't look for this, then you go back, you make another column, and you look through the same documents again. So it's better to know what you want to find out before you start doing this. And then coding frameworks, then how you actually code the collected things. But again, quite systematic way of going through evidence. But I think with the theory-based evaluations, as I think one of the things you might have now seen is that you need to be quite, that you can't start data collection immediately, that you have to have a period in which you figure out, especially if it's a new program or a new thing that you're looking at, that you need to be quite knowledgeable about the topic before you're able to plan how you're going to collect data, or which data you're going to collect, because you might end up collecting wrong information or data. So the tests. Okay, this is the written part, but basically it means that the straw in the wind is neither unique nor certain. That weakly supports, but doesn't make it. This is the circumstantial evidence that, let's say like all the people who were present at a certain festival could have stolen the money from the buffet. That's approximately it. The only thing is that you need to kind of be there. No, actually, a hoop is that you will need to have been there somehow. And this is the smoking gun. Let's say that the ones the ones who ran out of like whose bank account balance was really low, that they are the ones that we would that they would be our smoking gun, but it still doesn't prove anything. Whereas this one, unique and certain, let's say video footage of somebody being there and their fingerprint, or video footage of certain time slot, their fingerprint on the cash machine, and then leaving the buffet with something like this. that would be the decisive point. But the nicer way of presenting it is this. I like this, because here we come exactly to the sufficient and necessary. So if something is not sufficient nor necessary, it's not important. But if something is necessary but not sufficient, this is kind of like the how do I say? Like the first it's like a selection that whether this is important or not. Like it is that if you fail it, then you get eliminated, and then if you pass it, you would that in terms of the criminal thing, that you would be in the US, you would be in the line where people would say like, oh, number 4. So, but you would end up there, but it still doesn't make it certain that it's exactly you. And the smoking gun, on the other hand, it by itself it would be sufficient, but it's not necessary. So that doesn't prove things either. So you need the yes for both. So the fact that I would be present in a meeting would be, I think, the smoking gun, possibly, yeah. But that I'm present in a meeting and there is written documentation about the committee having reviewed what I want to, what I said, and then saying we decide to include this in the proposal. Then that would be clear. But again, I mean, this is a bit different from the standard way of doing evaluation, because you are really you're looking quite strongly into the evidence by itself, and yeah, as I said, it's like a probabilistic causation. So actually this is, now I have to add the source. This is again from Derek Beach and Estelle Raimondo. But this is actually from CIA.
Detectives, yeah.
Originally, yes. That, like, what's your probability of, what's the strength of the evidence? And you are trying to, of course, get to the beyond reasonable doubt, almost certainly. That's where you would like to get to. Below 50%, you are not able to confirm that this is how the change happened, that you want to be above the 60%. So this is an interesting way of looking at it, like that is the strongly confirming evidence or strongly disconfirming evidence. Yeah, I mean, these ones, they would just say that for sure it didn't happen this way. And that one would be like, I'm almost 100% sure that this is how it went. And then if you end up doing, you get some kind of a massive grant, and you're free for a couple of years, and you're able to do process tracing, then you could do this kind of comparing the cases. And then you look at then you would look at the contributions and the disaggregation again, and then compare them. So this is a different way of doing it. And now this is an example that I came up with. This is like totally from my own head. I guess this is my what I am dreaming of. There's a reduction of administrative burden for beneficiaries. And yeah, so, and this is the reason why I'm dreaming of this, is that in the program evaluation, there was a recommendation that the managing authority should improve the electronic application system or the electronic system to reduce the administrative burden of the beneficiaries. Let's say that they are asking for a lot of attachments and a lot of documents, and it's very complex, it's very long, it takes a lot of time and things like that. And so we say that you guys are wasting everybody's time for unnecessary things, so please make this more simple. And we recommend this as evaluators. Then we get so the desk officer reads the evaluation report and goes to the manager and says, like, listen, this is one of the big recommendations, and I think they are right. So maybe we should consider doing something. And then the head of managing authority says, like, okay, I have extra 200,000 euros here sitting on the bank account, and let us improve the system. Then they do tendering, kind of specifications, tendering process, whatnot. And then they select IT contractors who implement the changes. They have a 6-month development project in which they actually ask feedback from the final users that, what would make it more simple? Can you please test this? And we are thinking of doing it this way, and blah, blah, blah. And they do this, and it works out. And then it goes back to the desk officer, who has to then write guidance on the updated electronic system and communicate the changes to the beneficiaries. And then when the beneficiaries are using it again, the system is easier and faster, and we are they are spending less time and energy on the application and handling the project electronically. So this is the dream. That's how I imagine that my work ends up in helping other people's lives. I'm not a doctor, but I like to see that I like to think that I would my work would make the world a better place for the EU fund managers and the beneficiaries. Of course, challenges or barriers. Is there money for doing the thing? Are there human resources for doing the thing? Does the IT project work? Does it succeed? Not always. And are the final users engaged in the process? Or is it that just the managing authority decides everything and does something, and then the final user's like, oh gosh, what happened here? So that you need to have these things. And then contextual conditions. We need an enthusiastic desk officer to begin with, because otherwise the whole process would fall here. Or the head of MA is interested, otherwise the process falls here. Okay, I didn't add the skills of the IT contractors and things like that. But this would be the process theory of change, how an evaluation report ends up reducing administrative burden, or like how the evaluation actually affects. And then we would start looking into what was the actual change, and how did it happen. We would be looking for information such as, let's say, we would get a snapshot of the desk officer's calendar where there is a meeting request with the head of managing authority saying discussion of the evaluation report, or like discussion of administrative burdens caused by the IT system. Then we would be like, yes, hurrah. Then here at this point, then we would be looking at the national calls for tender, the registries, and then looking at the tender, which starts with The evaluation of the program identified the high administrative burden. And then it would include a couple of things that we have said which parts are necessary to be changed. And yeah, and then in the end, there would be, let's say let's say like a newspaper article about, some beneficiaries saying that, and now that the IT system was updated, it takes much less time to apply for the funding. And then we would have kind of established the proof. But yeah, so this was just like my personal dream. I don't know. There are some other things where like the evaluators' dreams come true. The other thing could have been when the evaluator says that more research is required on policy. Yeah, all of the researchers say that you write in the conclusions that more research is needed on this, and the contribution is more research funding on something.
And then you get another project.
You get another project, yes, and this is an eternal loop. So, but things like this. But this is basically, so looking at the intricate changes there. If I remember correctly, I think we are, oh, yes, no. I don't want to go there now. Yeah, because we are supposed to have a break. But I think we have still a bit time. So I would ask if you have questions or comments. How enthusiastic would you be about this this method? I think I've once recommended this like process tracing actually for the Interreg Europe program. We did a theory-based evaluation for them, and because they had this idea, they have these European-wide projects, and it's like a program for projects in a sense. So European-wide projects that the outcome that they want to have is a change in regional policy, or like improved regional policy. So they have this, let's say, project on circular economy with 13 different partners from, let's say, 10 member states participating. And each one of the partners has identified, let's say, that we want to affect the regional or the cohesion fund program in our country. We want it to include circular economy aspects. And that's the change they want to produce. And this is actually in the program. It's it makes it very difficult but of course, they are already gathering some of this kind of evidence that, that has the project affected the regional policies. First step is that, is there a change in the regional policy? Is it in the document, in the policy document? Is it in the implementation or something like this? And then they ask the beneficiaries, so like the national beneficiaries, they ask them to document that, like the proof that it was caused by the project. And now this is the hard part. At least in the previous programming period, they didn't manage to do this extremely rigorously. So then, we could recommend that you should actually, the way that you should do this is that, unfortunately, it's very resource intensive also for them, because of course, the beneficiaries, they say like, we had this circular economy project, and the regional development program was changed. And then, when we did the interviews, it was like, okay, so what did you do? And how much of this was because of you. And there were some who were saying like, okay, well, actually the government was working on a circular economy strategy anyway, and then they just changed it. So, I happened to be lucky that they changed it, and, I can say that it was a change. And then there were others, okay, this is not the perfect example, but, others would be able to say that, well, we went to present our project to the ministry, who invited us into the working group, and they asked me to be the secretary or whatever, and then some of the recommendations from our projects are actually included there, and then we could say that okay, this is credible enough. But so that to try to establish the link between the action and the change first, to see whether there was change at all. But so that you would do the evaluation of otherwise, but then to prove this link you would use process tracing. So I think this could be interesting, for some of the main change mechanisms, and I think this could be very useful for the managing authorities or the policymakers, because then they could see that why is it that this thing works and that thing doesn't, or what is it, what is required. I recently had a project where we were where I had to find out that what kind of factors make farmers choose more environmentally friendly practices. And what is it? What motivates them? Yeah, and this was exactly about finding out that we have what should we offer? How should we create our motivation system in such a way that the farmers would very happily choose these measures and implement them nicely? And I thought that was pretty interesting, because then you got into this kind of also psychological aspects and long-term planning and all kinds of other things. Yeah.
Yes, I have
Yeah.
maybe two experiences. First of all, in big evaluation studies, you have an inception phase, first phase. During that phase, you have the opportunity to first get acquainted with the documents, but also to talk to the commissioner about bottlenecks in the system, where they can already point to some aspects which might be then researched further through process tracing. So this is a good opportunity then to fine-tune, and there the evaluator has the opportunity to propose and discuss eventually if there are some additional funds, or maybe a new evaluation can come out of it if they don't have the funds for it. So in the recommendations you can already announce, okay, these aspects we will not be able to cover, but in the future our next evaluation can take this on. In this way we have also introduced the process evaluations in the system during the interim phases of the programs. So they are more and more utilized, because those evaluations are helping the program managers to improve their processes, and for them it's really helpful. And yes, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I like this idea, because you propose an additional study using process tracing, and then the managing author says, I don't know who knows process tracing. I do. So yeah, but yeah, so I think this is interesting, but yeah, they are a bit different ways, and they look at a bit different questions, but as with all evaluation methods, you need to find the right combination for the questions that you need to get answered. And that's why it's so important that also the clients know, or that they ask good questions. This is I have really been battling with some of the sort of recurring clients, and I've been telling sometimes that you can't ask to what extent questions if you know that it's not possible to make or to do a quantitative evaluation. That please don't do this. You know, that like the only thing we can say is that we cannot answer it, or at the beginning of the project we propose the modification of the question. That's what we usually do. Because, for example, if we had this question like, to what extent did the increased focus on animal welfare change the consumer interest in domestic food? Wow, like no, I can't do this. You know, that might be that, yes, well, we could do like a massive survey with thousands of respondents.
Because I was gonna say this, sometimes it feels like what you're doing is really on the borderline of science, because that seems like a research question, not a evaluation question.
Exactly, yeah, and that, yeah, but then
It is a research study.
yeah. But that question that would end up costing like 10 times more than the rest of them. And that's when we need to make a balance, because we are running like a kind of like container ship that it has to hold also, like from the budget point of view. And
But if they have been collecting their own data since the beginning of the project, then if you already have that data, then you can work with that. Then the cost will decrease.
Yes. This is the ideal case. Yes.
And it's based on earlier evaluation recommendations.
Yeah. But quite often the client does not have data, or they have data but it has nothing to do with, or like it doesn't help you. So yeah, there are like, for example, there are some indicators. I have this like one, well, it's like my pet hate indicator in the rural development program of the EU. Number of people having benefiting from improved services. Now, on the project level, it makes some kind of a sense, I get money for business startup. I start like a dog kennel where or how do you call it? like a dog hotel where people can bring their dogs. It depends on me how I define it, who benefits from it. Is it the entire municipality, people within 50-kilometer radius, or people within 50-kilometer radius who actually own dogs? Or do their neighbors benefit as well when the dog is not there? Okay, so that depends a bit. But yeah, at the project level, it kind of makes sense. But then when you add this up, and this is actually a composite indicator, it's a cumulative indicator of all the projects within the same geographical area having benefited somebody. So, for example, the Finnish Rural Development Program, the indicator for a number of people benefiting from the Rural Development Program, I think from 2013, that's 2007-13 programming period, it was like 30 million. Now we are 5 million in the country. So it was Finland, Sweden, Norway, St. Petersburg, and parts of, Western Russia, who benefited from the program. And to me, like, this just makes no sense. But this is compulsory information to collect, and they have it, but I don't do anything with it. But yeah, I have a particular beef with this indicator, so every time I can, I do mention that, could we come up with something better? In the agricultural field, now they actually came up with something better. They are using GIS to use layers of which agricultural area is doing something, and how they are contributing to, for example, nutrient leakage. And that makes more sense because there's no double counting. But in this indicator, the double count, it's not even double counting, but they're counting a lot of it. So yeah, But yeah, so there is always, if the client has data that you can get, that always helps. But it doesn't alone make the. It's quite rare that you can only work with the data they have. Because also what I have noticed is that quite often they have monitoring data, which is good up to a certain point. It's good up to the outputs, roughly, maybe results, partially. But you would need to have, like, you need more context indicators, and you need a wider set of data. And especially if you do quantitative evaluation, then you need the background factors. And those you need to find out from somewhere. And that can be very costly. Like, for example, I think a simple thing like business development. How did the grants advance the development of SMEs? What you would ideally need are the annual accounts of the companies. Now, actually, interestingly, at least in Finland, the ministry made a deal with the tax office that they get the information of the companies from the tax office straight, so that they can actually monitor that. But then you still need to establish the counterfactual. Similar companies with similar kind of background. So if the client is prepared, and they have thought in advance, maybe like 5 years or so, that we are going to need this kind of information. We will ask somebody to do this kind of analysis. So let's get prepared and do already the data agreements and also think about the control group. Then you're just happily writing in there as an evaluator. Oh, thank you. I will start working. But quite often it doesn't work that way, and it's you who is going to battle with the statistical office to get access to some kind of data, or negotiate with the tax office of whether you're able to even get the data and how much does it cost, and did you have the budget for it, who's going to pay for it, and is it useful. The worst case is that that data would cost you 10,000 euros only for you to realize that it's rubbish.
Yeah, sometimes it happens. They say like, oh, we have a panel study or done, and then you try to get access to those panel studies, and those were just basic.
Yeah.
Just basic information, and your question that you want to look into is quite more complex.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it does happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just confirming with the data that the relevant data is not available.
Yeah. Now we have the Finnish ministries. Now they have started to do this. That you have to actually you have to assess in the proposal the possible available data and information and assess their relevance. So you have to actually know what you would be looking at and how useful that would be for your study, which I think that's, you need somebody who has done this before, because you can't go into a new field. If you throw me in, let's say, like healthcare, I have no idea what kind of data there is or information, and then I don't know how relevant anything is until I start looking for it. So they are also thinking about this, but then, of course, then it means that you need to be prepared. But, okay, I think we should have a break.
Yes. Can you handle the second part without me? So I come back at 2?
Okay?
Until the lunch break?
Yeah.
Because in the afternoon we will have the creative part of the workshop. There were 2 ideas. Either we go completely digital, if you have at least in each group one person who can work in Canva or is very knowledgeable in drawing something in Word or whatever application you use. If not, we can look for flip chart paper and try to do it, and then in a traditional way of drawing.
Yeah.
Drawing,
Yeah.
What,
So, yeah.
what is your preference?
It depends what we are doing.
Yeah.
We will do a stakeholder analysis, and we will do a theory of change mapping, and based on the youth policy, but from your perspectives.
Yeah.
And it will be basically a poster presentation for tomorrow, no?
Yeah.
During the conference.
A Thursday.
Just
Yeah.
to show the results of the training.
Yeah. So first we have a break, and then we have then we're going to do this one. We're going to do an exercise about the process tracing. That's going to be after this break, and then after lunch, then we are going to start working on the posters. Or not we, but you. But yeah, it's nicer to say we because it feels more inclusive. So so after lunch is going to be the poster preparation, and because tomorrow we will be at the conference.